Good day, and I'm your host, Dr. Ken Brantley. It's a pleasure having you along for this brief talk. I've entitled my talk, Fallen Angels. I was perusing the internet earlier today, and as I perused the internet, I came across a minister who had decided, or who was asked to step down from his pastorate as a result of personal indiscretions. As a man of God, this was probably one of the most challenging things that he had to do. He also, being the pastor of a rather large megachurch, had to make the choice to be rehabilitated under his father's care. His father was also a pastor. Messengers from heaven are called angels. They are beings that send information directly from the throne room of God. A lot of times we elevate pastors to the role of messengers or maybe mediums to the throne room of heaven. But they're human beings. Every one of us is a human being, frail and potentially able to make errors in judgment. But what I found interesting about these posts that were placed and these pastors who were chastised by various YouTube programs for their indiscretions, I noticed that very few people actually regarded the fact that these men held a position, and perhaps because they held the position, the expectation was greater that they would be infallible. But I think of any of the experiences that I've seen where pastors have been defrocked or have lost their pastorates, it's got to be even more difficult for them. Not that I'm making excuses for human frailties, but it's got to be pretty difficult. It's also got to be something of a challenge for them, because so many people are depending upon them to guide them as a shepherd does a flock. I know as a public figure and having been in serving in a variety of capacities in the ministry, I know it was very difficult for me when I had a rocky marriage to stand in the pulpit and try to minister to others when I was hurting myself. I knew it would be difficult to be hypocritical having a home that was under such duress, and that home be something that provided no peace and solace, but then having to stand up in the pulpit and try to deliver peace and solace to those who are suffering emotionally, or to serve in the capacity of leadership. It becomes even more difficult because the expectation is higher. I don't know that I'm making an excuse, because anybody who takes a role in leadership has to understand the potential challenges that are faced. But I think everyone at some point has to do a real gut check and say, well, there isn't anyone who isn't human. Leaders have bad marriages. Leaders have challenges just like everyone else. And unfortunately, many of those leaders hide behind the robe before they address those. And it is the shock of finding that out that I think causes the congregations that they serve such great consternation. As a person who from time to time shares thoughts about issues of faith. I think it's important to admonish yet again those who listen to us who are sharing positive words of affirmation that we are simply conduits. We are not the idol. Fallen angels are basically messengers who are no longer able to stand without blame before an almighty and all-knowing and holy God. But what I think is really amazing is that the very grace that many ministers who preach the gospel, the very grace that they try to get their congregation to understand, the very rehabilitative power of the Savior, Jesus Christ, and his death, those challenges that Jesus Christ faced on our behalf, and the fact that he died to restore every sinner, a pastor in the pulpit to a prostitute on the corner, he worked to save each of them. It makes me grateful that those who castigate these pastors have neither heaven nor hell to put anyone in. And I'm very grateful for that. I think if we took more time as human beings and less time as judge, juror, and executioner, that many of the world's woes could be addressed, and many people could be restored, and lives could be much enhanced. I use the analogy. It's if a person is drowning in the ocean, it seems to me that those who are in judgment are busy pointing out that the person drowning is wet. I think the person drowning already knows they're wet. It's unfortunate that people may not choose to leave the comfort of the shore to go out and to rescue someone who obviously knows they're sinking. The sad part is that many times it's easier to simply point and say someone is drowning, rather than to go out and get out of your comfort zone and touch the hand of someone who might be in distress. I don't know about whether or not these pastors are justified in the reasons for why they step down from their pastorates, but I certainly do know one thing. It's unfortunate to watch YouTubers take lives into their own hands by virtue of putting their tongues on people who they don't know, people who have chosen to step out of roles that have been very difficult for them to maintain. I think it's interesting that some people make their whole life about the wrongs and the gossip about other people's failings and mistakes. I wish that there were people who spent more time trying to encourage those who were stumbling. I wish that there was somehow a word fitly spoken on behalf of those who are struggling. I remember a church that I attended and had the experience of being on the elder board, and I remember the year before I ended up on the elder board, I really wanted our church to get involved in evangelism. I wanted people to know that there was something better than just the misery and suffering of day-to-day life without any hope of something after life. It was difficult. You would think that a church would want to go out and get more members and help spread the gospel and help people to become more attuned to heaven. But what I encountered were people who said those people out there might be dangerous. Those people out there are maybe not from our neighborhood, or those people out there may not fit in our pews with us? Aren't we doing the same thing when we choose to throw somebody out of the church, someone who's already in? The church is a place for sinners who are trying to get well. Even Jesus himself said, "It is only the sick that need a physician." So to simply point out that people are sick is foolish. The fact that they're sitting near someone who can heal them is wiser on their part. I'm not making excuses for people who fail or people who fall from grace. But I do wish to encourage each of us who are on this path towards understanding, whatever you call it, a spiritual walk or your own personal philosophical walk or destiny, whatever you call it. I think we should try to take more time to focus in on spreading some positivity around. I'm grateful that the God that I serve is looking to encourage me when I fall. Days when I am too tired to deal with all the issues of life, it is that still small voice that comforts me in the night. It is that still small voice that simply says, "You can get up one more day." It's that still small voice that says, "Just put one foot on the ground and stand up. Try to get that other foot out of the bed and stand up and keep going." So many people are really good at criticism. They don't accomplish much. They don't reach many goals, but they're always judge, juror, and executioner for those who really get in and get their hands dirty. The next time you decide to think negatively about someone, try to put yourself in their shoes. Try to see what expectations you've placed on them, and if they're even valid. Many times they aren't. Try to see whether or not your expectations are what are clouding your judgment in terms of how you deal with others. I think for me, I decided that it was imperative to start to look at life from a different perspective, modifying my expectations to give people an opportunity to simply be who they are. Disappointments are fewer when we allow people to simply be themselves, not live up to our expectations. Had an occasion to speak to a person who was full of bitterness. It was an unfortunate experience, but through that experience I realized that this person was just tormented by all the negativity and criticism that they could spew out. And I thought about it and I said, how many YouTubers make careers out of spewing venom? How many newspapers are sold because of negative press? How many television shows espouse negativity? How many television news broadcasts are paid for with bleeding and hate and trauma and negativity? So maybe what we need to do is turn those things off. Stop listening to the negativity. Start listening to something positive. Fill your mind with good things. Fill your mind with positive affirmations. And sometimes you might even have to tell people who are negative and who are sowing bad energy into your space that they're not welcome in your life. I think the key for anyone to maintain a positive attitude is to start taking control of your thought processes. This show, Inspiration and Insight for Life, is simply trying to help people